Okay, the last question is, do you think is it a reluctant or voluntary choice?
Mm, I think it's both. I think at some point people look at how much they earn and think I can't earn more unless I do more, right? So so they are reluctant to do it, but they feel they need to do it. But I also think that younger generations have seen how older generations live their lives, and they make conscious, voluntary decisions to step away from the way that their parents were living, so that they can simplify a much more complicated life. And I think the lifestyles of like modern or postmodern generations, like the millennials and the younger than millennials, are very very much a re-evaluation of access. Because from the point of the 1950s all the way until the 1990s, even though there were a few recessions in between, right? You will see that human beings have been, particularly in the West, striving very, very hard to earn a lot of money, and at the same time, they enjoyed a huge amount of wealth uh, that was maybe uh, maybe allowed them to have a very good foundation for the future, right? For their future when they are older. But after the 1990s, right, the beginning of the 2000s, especially in the first 10 years of the 2000s, 2000 until 2010, you'll notice that this has there have been great changes. Of course, in the 2008, there was the very huge, crisis, economic crisis, global economic crisis. This is something that I think millennials and younger generations remember as a very bad situation that hit, the world very, very hard. And this is the beginning of when people start working and realizing, well, I don't have enough. I don't have enough to buy a house, or I have only enough to buy a small car, or I can only rent instead of buy a house. And this is the beginning of people under looking at this situation and going, I have no choice. And so even though I want to have a house, I cannot. And so there's a reluctance there. But then, of course, there is a reaction to that. And when students continue to live within the help of their parents, and then slowly leave the help of their parents and try to be independent, they realize it is much harder to live because of the economic issues involved. So you can see voluntary movements. Like, for example, if you watch on the internet, there's a huge market now for tiny houses, right? Small, very, very simple living spaces where it is more minimalist and less luxurious, right? And there's a huge market for prefabricated housing. So housing that is built on cheaper materials, but easier to build and cost less. So why is this happening? Because people are still trying to find ways to own property or own a built house or something, but are realizing that they need to be voluntarily less luxurious than their previous generation, than their parents' generation. So you will see people willing to live in a one-bedroom house, or a two-bedroom house, or they will rather live in a small compact space, which is only like a studio home, right, where there's no room. The whole place is just, there's a bed, there's a place to cook, and there are toilets, but they are not big open spaces that are compared to like the ones that were used, that your parents or your grandparents' generation are used to. That is because that is them reacting to living in within their means. And this is where it is at the moment And so that's why they've made a choice, and that choice is for them to live in a more simple way. And so if you want to call that lying flat, um, I would agree. Yes, lying flat is something that is both, yeah, there's a push factor, a reluctance to do it, but they have to do it because nobody wants to be uncomfortable, but they do not have a choice. But at the same time, they're also voluntarily doing it because they see there may be benefits to not chasing too much materialism or trying to collect as much things, and there may be other views that it might be better for the environment to have fewer cars or to possess less material things, to be able to reuse again. And if someone were to talk about these situations and say, oh, these people are, sort of trying to save and they're trying to be more resourceful, I would agree. Because if you look at post Second World War, that means 1945 onwards, before the 1950s, the generations of people who were leaving the war is finished, and many of them were poor and could not afford many things. And during the war and immediately after the war, a lot of people were resourceful. They lived with less because they couldn't afford a lot of things. And so sometimes I look at those situations and I compare them to the economic situations of students today. And I think to myself, yes, it's very different. They didn't go through war, but they know that what they earn is not enough or doesn't have as enough power for earning power or spending power than their previous generations before them. So they have to be creative. They have to think, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this if I only have this so much of income, even though I finished my university or even though I even got a master's and I still cannot earn as much. So I have to be creative. I have to think. I cannot live in a big house. I cannot be expected to live in a big house like my parents did. I cannot be expected to have two cars, and I cannot be expected to have too many children. I have to save. I have to be creative on how I do things. I maybe need to live in a small house, or in some places, some people, even in the West, are living in vans, vehicles, and they're saying it's cheaper for me to do this. I may be able to spend the money to buy a house or pay rent, but I don't want to pay rent. I want to save money. And there are countless, situations where you'll see people on TikTok or on social media say things like, "Follow me in my journey as I, want to build a tiny house, and it cost me $60,000 US to build a tiny house. So I will live in my car for the next year to save money for that." Um, so in the previous generations, they would have looked at this and looked down on the situation and say things like, "Oh, how can you have to do this? You can get a job, or go to university." But going to university costs a lot of money. Getting a job doesn't pay as much as they would like to, and in many cases, these people they earn money from many different jobs, just so they can, but they have to save at the same time and be creative and find ways to build their own house, and so that they're not dependent on banks to give them loans and stuff like that. So these are all things that I think are symptoms of the situation that's happening economically. And then the reaction from this generation or the younger generation is to see that these are the things that they have challenges that they have to overcome, and that's the reason why they are acting the way that they are, or behaving the way that they are within the working environment. So I think those are the things that we should consider. Right? I'm not saying that there are no people out there who are unmotivated. I'm sure they are, but there are a lot of people who are motivated by survival. They want to live, and if they need to live, they will do things that they need to do to achieve that. So I think those things are worth thinking about.
Okay, sir, thanks for your answer.
Okay.